The Banner Sports Medicine High Performance Center recently hired sports psychologist Dr. Sierra Dimberg to help aid the mental skills of student athletes, but they will go beyond the performance on the field. And with us now is Dr. Dimberg to discuss the importance of mental training for student athletes and how that training can help people not involved in sports. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
What are some of the basics that go into this? And is there more of a challenge when young student athletes are trying to figure this out, especially as so many other things are going on in their minds and their bodies?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a challenge. I think being a kid in general can be a challenge. There's lots of things, and then adding some of the stressors and pressures that they have as an athlete. But some of the basics of mental skills, I think a solid foundation always starts with mindfulness, being able to learn how to control your thoughts, be able to regulate your emotions, either on the field or off the field, and then different things as well, like goal setting, connecting to your values, things like that.
We think about mindfulness quite a bit, but I think a lot of us think about it in our living rooms or maybe in a yoga class. Can that be put in practice when a young student athlete is actually on the field, on the court, and how much, again, coming back to how challenging that is there some sort of special skill that is needed there, and does that grow within, or can it be taught very quickly?
I think it depends on your definition of quickly, but it can definitely be taught. It's one of my favorite skills to work on with people, both in clinical practice as well as in mental skills. But I think just like with any athlete, for any sport that you're practicing, you have to practice that sport, right? You have to practice being able to kick a soccer ball or shoot a basketball. So it's very similar in mindfulness and being able to practice it, so then when you are on the field, then you can use those skills a little bit more accessibly.
I understand you have a military background.
I do.
So how does that parallel with some of the things? Because I would think if someone perhaps is flying an F-16 or something, there's a certain mindfulness one needs to have. Can there be similarities, though, in terms of practice in sports and practice in the military?
Absolutely. I think it all comes down to performance. Pilots or special warfare service members or athletes, they're all performing in some capacity, maybe different level of risk involved there, but the skills still definitely apply.
In our introduction, we mentioned the fact that this can be for people who are not athletes as well. Are the practices the same, though, or should there be variations based on whether someone is doing it to prepare for a competition or just to get through the day?
I think there could definitely be variations. I don't know that necessarily a visualization of a successful play or run would be as helpful for someone that's not an athlete, but being able to find unique ways that kind of speak to that person, right? So it doesn't just have to be an athlete, but finding different opportunities and ways to be able to practice it outside of can be accessible for everybody.
How much have you learned over the course of doing this? Have you learned that there were some challenges perhaps you expected young people to have, and then you've learned, oh, I hadn't quite thought about this, or that some of the challenges you had considered were actually even larger than you initially expected?
I've definitely learned a lot. And I think just the nature of my job and working with people, it's one of the things I love about it is I'm never going to know it all, right? I think just by being introduced to tons of different people, different sports, different problems, stressors, things like that, I continue to learn and continue to apply those skills in whatever way is helpful for the individual.
How much of an evolution is there in this sort of area of study or area of practice? Because I keep thinking about the idea that mindfulness is sort of an everyday word for a lot of us now, whereas a few years ago it really wasn't. So are you seeing that more and more people are accepting of this sort of process?
Absolutely. I do work with some of the teams, youth teams for soccer, and so many of them already know the word mindfulness, and they know, oh, it means awareness, or it means, so they know some of the key words throughout it, but then how to put that into practice, I think, is the tough part. We all know the word, but what to do with that and how to practice it, I think, is the tough part. And that's where I come in to teach it.
Right. Well, my last thing for you is I was thinking about the idea of student athletes even working with coaches. Is there a way that, like, let's say their football coach or their soccer coach can actually learn from what the student athletes are doing? In some ways we think, oh, well, you're going to learn from the coach. But in the case of this, maybe young people are more open to trying these things, so it might be going up as opposed to going down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw this within the Navy as well, that some of the leaders were hearing some of these terms and kind of like, okay, what is this about, right? All these young sailors are talking about it. But I think the same can be said for coaches, that they're hearing these kids talk about it and wanting to put these skills and topics into their own practice for coaching as well.
Okay. Well, Dr. Dimberg, we'll stop there. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.